Okay, let's talk about something we've all struggled with. Trying to force yourself to go to the gym, or eat better, or just get more work done, only to crash and burn, and then, of course, feel awful about it. But what if the whole way we think about self-discipline, all that stuff about grit and willpower, is just wrong? Let's get into it.
We're going to kick things off with this really provocative idea from author Mark Manson. Just let that sink in. The idea that if you're struggling, it's not because you're weak, it's because you're using the wrong strategy. This pretty much flips everything we've been taught about just trying harder on its head.
So to really get why Manson's quote is such a game changer, we have to start by dismantling an idea we all kind of grew up with, the willpower trap. Yeah, it's our favorite myth, this belief that self-discipline is all about having some kind of superhuman mental strength.
I mean, we've all heard this, right? That your willpower is like a muscle. The more you flex it, the stronger it gets. It's this whole philosophy of just denying yourself things, of forcing your way through every temptation. But what if that so-called muscle isn't really a muscle at all?
Now, this isn't just some random metaphor. It actually has a formal name in psychology, ego depletion. It was made famous by psychologist Roy Baumeister, and the theory is pretty simple. Your self-control is like a gas tank. Every single time you use it, saying no to that donut, forcing yourself to finish a report, you're using up a little bit of that fuel.
And here's the classic experiment that seemed to prove it. In Baumeister's study, he'd have some people come into a room that smelled of fresh-baked cookies, and he'd tell them, you can't have any. Then he'd give them a really frustrating puzzle to solve. And guess what? The people who had to resist the cookies gave up on the puzzle way faster. The conclusion seemed obvious, right? Their willpower tank was empty. This single study became the bedrock for the whole willpower as a muscle idea.
But here's the thing. That bedrock has started to get some major cracks. So now we're going to look at why leaning on that muscle isn't just a bad strategy. It can actually be pretty destructive.
Okay, so this is the crucial part. When we try to just deny our feelings and force ourselves to do things, it kicks off this really toxic cycle. Mark Manson points out that trying to suppress our desires doesn't actually make them go away. It just makes us feel ashamed for even having them. And that shame turns into self-loathing, which, and here's the irony, makes us more likely to give in. It is a downward spiral, and it's powered entirely by this flawed idea of willpower.
And here's the real kicker. That foundational science, the cookie experiment, the whole theory of ego depletion, it's basically falling apart. Over the last 10 years or so, psychology has been going through what's called a replication crisis, and ego depletion is one of its biggest casualties.
Just take a look at this timeline. For years, the effects seemed totally legit. But then, around 2015, the whole thing started to unravel. A new analysis suggested the original research was messed up by something called publication bias, which basically means that all the studies that found nothing just got stuffed in a drawer and never published. Then came the real tests. In 2016, a huge study with over 24 labs tried to recreate the original effect, and they found nothing. Zero. Zilch. And then another massive one in 2021 found the exact same thing. So that muscle we were all trying so hard to strengthen, it might not even exist.
So, if willpower is a myth, what in the world actually works? Well, this brings us to the real game changer, our environment. It's this invisible hand that shapes our behavior way, way more than we realize.
And this quote from James Clear, the author of the amazing book Atomic Habits, just nails it. Instead of trying to look inward and find more grit, we need to start looking outward at the world we've built around ourselves.
This is such a brilliant illustration of how powerful environment is. The biologist Jared Diamond pointed out that agriculture spread 3 times faster across Europe and Asia than it did in the Americas or Africa. Now, why was that? It wasn't because the farmers in Eurasia were smarter or more motivated. Nope, it was because the continents are literally shaped differently. Europe and Asia stretch east to west, which means the climate stays pretty much the same across huge distances. But the Americas, they stretch north to south, meaning you run into drastic climate changes that slowed everything down. The environment, not willpower, was what dictated the pace of human progress.
And focusing on environment lines up perfectly with how our brains are actually wired. Think of the part of your brain that plans, focuses, and gets things done as its CEO. In science, they call this executive function. The problem is, this CEO gets tired and overwhelmed really easily. So, the issue isn't that you're lazy. It's that we're asking our brain CEO to do all the heavy lifting, instead of building an environment that does most of the hard work for us.
Okay, so this is where it gets really practical. If our environment is the key, how do we actually use that? How can we literally design our lives to make discipline feel easy, or maybe even automatic?
Just look at the difference here. The old model is all about fighting yourself using shame as a weapon. The new model, it's about supporting yourself. The fundamental question you ask yourself completely changes. It goes from, how can I force myself to do this, to a much smarter, kinder, and frankly more effective question, how can I make this easier?
So how do we make things easier? Well, it pretty much boils down to these 4 simple but incredibly powerful principles from folks like Aidan Helfont and James Clear. It is all about managing 2 things, friction and cues. You want to make your good habits as effortless as possible, and your bad habits require a ton of effort.
And here's what that actually looks like. Want to work out more? Reduce the friction. Lay out your gym clothes the night before so you literally trip over them. Want to eat less junk food? Add friction. Just don't keep it in the house. Make it so you have to actually go to the store to get it. Want to floss? Make the cue obvious, with the floss right next to your toothbrush so you can't possibly miss it. And want to get distracted less? Make the cue invisible. Hide those addictive apps in some folder on the last page of your phone. It sounds simple, but it is so effective.
And this is really the whole point. This is a massive paradigm shift. We're not trying to become willpower warriors anymore. We're trying to become intelligent architects of our own lives. We're trying to create systems where the right choice is also the easy choice. The real goal is to make discipline irrelevant, because your environment is already doing all the heavy lifting for you.
And that's the big thought I want to leave you with. Instead of always asking, how can I get more self-discipline, start asking yourself, how can I design a life that requires less of it? What is one tiny change you could make to your environment today to make a good habit just a little bit easier? Seriously, the answer to that question, well, it might just be the key to everything.